When modeling, sometimes we look for quick models for taking a break from more demanding projects. Some weeks before, I uploaded a video building a Sherman tank from Airfix. Now, I will show you how I painted this Sherman Firefly just in a weekend from start to finish, including everything from priming and base coating to the last finishing details. This is Notjustpanzer and welcome to my hobby channel. So let's go for it. First of all, and before painting, it's key to clean properly the surface from dust particles and getting a nice surface for painting later. Here, common alcohol is our best friend. Just a few passes will do the job. In this 1/72 scale, I prefer to work comfortably. Because of its size, handling this kind of models is always tricky, so I plan to hold each part separately. I took some cylindrical cork pieces secured with double-sided tape and some blue tack for securing the track pieces. That will be more than enough for handling the model. So, time for painting. This time I used this Vallejo Olive Drab primer. I know this is not an accurate primer color for a British tank, but it will work fine. I diluted in an almost 60-40% ratio, and I airbrush it all over the model. It is very important to apply very thin layers in this small scale. You only need a bad airbrush shot with too much paint flooding the surface to lose details in the model surface. Carefully, I keep going applying thin layers around all the model, and I'm good to go. Finally, in some places like the turret, I needed to add an extra layer of paint for holding everything together. For representing the British Olive Drab, I will use Tamiya XF61 on its own as a base color. I like to use this tone for representing British Olive Drab because it allows you to create very interesting shades and also keeps very well its green tone. Again, I cover the entire model with no exceptions. I think it is noticeable the good covering of the Tamiya paints. The finish is very thin and consistent, and thanks to the primer coat underneath, the result is excellent. Already both colors used are very similar. You can see the differences with the unpainted turret piece. Painting small subjects like 1/72 scale models means creating greater contrast when painting. If we want our model to stand out when finished, because of their size, some details are so small that I like to increase the highlighting process for getting nice results. So for this first highlight, I will add some XF60 to the main color. With this first highlighting mix, I will paint the main details and surfaces of the tank, just avoiding the facing down parts and the chassis lower area. Although it's just a first coat, we should be limiting some places if you want to build a good painted result. Moving to the following color highlight, I take now some XF15 flesh tone. This color is very useful because you can mix it with a wide variety of colors for creating some highlighting tones. This flesh tone contains a good amount of white in its formula, so I recommend you to add small amounts of paint for controlling the mix better. If not, the resulting color could be too bright and desaturated. You can see how this second highlight has a better contrast with the previous coats. In this second application, I focus in painting some of the very raised details, leaving some of the vertical plates and hidden areas without covering. In the main hull sides, I try to create some olive green streaking shades by applying vertical passes. And finally in the turret, I paint the most exposed details like hatches, vision ports and small parts. You can see how each part has received a different tone depending on its position in the model. And just look how they work all together. For sealing everything tight and together, I take Tamiya Clear. I started using this product recently, and I'm really in love with its results. It creates a really hard coat that protects the airbrush paint job, and it dries very quick, which allows me to keep working almost immediately. At the same time, the second purpose for using clear varnish is to prepare the surface for decal placing. Decals performance is better in glossy surfaces, so this is the best way to assure a good result. Kit instructions offers you two types of markings, and I chose the B option, just a standard British green color with some tactical numbers in the turret. In this kit, decals are printed well and have good looking appearance. For placing them, I went with my standard approach for decals. First, I dive each part in tap water, and when waiting for the decals for getting wet completely, I apply some tap water in the model surface, which will help me to displace the decals if I need to make some positioning adjustments, until I get the correct position. With a soft brush I remove the decal from its frame and I place it in the turret. Sometimes I need to correct the position, so for that I prefer to use some soft brushes. Quality of these particular decals from Airfix is surprisingly high. They are nicely printed and they adapt to the surface perfectly. In most cases I wouldn't have needed some decal liquids. Even in the turret texture they adapted pretty well. Finally, for playing safe, I decided to apply a few coats of microsol decal adapter, especially in the turret area with the cast texture, where I also used a cotton swab for pressing softly the decals. So when kept in place, I just seal them again with more clay varnish. Working in this way will keep the decals stamped forever. Now all the model is varnished in a glossy finish. I check Vallejo matte and gloss varnishes, and I apply them in a 50% ratio for getting a satin finish. I prefer to work with a satin finish surface, which is more realistic and also still keeps some shine like a real vehicle. Just have a look how these decals have an excellent result in the model. They look like painted directly in the surface with no signs of silvering. Now, checking the main result of the airbrush and decal processes, I decided to add some more contrast to the model with some acrylic colors, especially to the smallest pieces of the model that could miss the detail with the future weathering effects. With this lighter tone of green, I painted some of the most exposed details and some of the main and sharp edges of the hood and turret. I worked with a very diluted paint, which allowed me to create some blended transitions, avoiding some hard edge contrasting pieces. Right now it might seem very contrasting with the rest of the paint job, but later you will see how they complement perfectly each other. In the turret I especially focused in the small details like bolts and vision ports, and for finishing I decided to end the acrylic work painting the remaining parts of the tank, such as the spare ammo boxes, the rear jerrycan, and priming the spare tracks with black color. Now acrylic work is finished in the whole area. You can see how all the small details are more evident now, but at the end they don't attract too much attention. In the track pieces it was mandatory to complete the detail painting. In this case I went with a dark grey color for painting the rubber band of the road wheels, and for base coating the tracks I used a mix of English uniform and pale sand for achieving a light and neutral sand color. By now there is no need to detail more of these pieces. Future weathering techniques will finish the work. Alright, all the model has been painted and the small parts received their painting details. It's time to move to oil weathering. To start with weathering, I will apply some oil pin washes to outline the model. I have doubts about applying first some oil rendering effect, but at the end I discarded it because of the relatively small size of the model. For choosing a wash color, I took sepia and black oil, and I mixed them in a 50% ratio. This will create a dark brown tone that will work very well with the green armor. When diluted properly, this custom wash will extend perfectly around details in the model. The previous setting coat helps to this technique to run very smooth. This dark wash is applied all around the model, focusing in the panel lines, rivets or raised details. Every tiny part with some texture and detail will stand by its own when diluted properly. In the whole area the pin wash becomes extremely useful. These parts are full of small hatches, plates or fuel caps that are excellent candidates for oil washes. When this oil wash is dry to the touch, it's time for blend the effect and remove the excess of paint. I start working with the same enamel thinner and a clean brush. Now it's a matter of removing the excess with a clean brush, always unloading it in a dry tissue. Oil wash should be accumulated around these little details, but not in the areas in between. I mean, when blending, you should remove the paint from the non-desired places. But also, you should be careful enough and leaving the wash in the correct areas around the main details. Just little by little, when blending the effect, the model starts becoming a more contrasted piece. Pin wash is a must technique in every scale model. It helps to raise all the small details that every tiny piece has. And now that I'm finishing with the pin wash blending, you can realize how all the previous hand-painted details have been perfectly integrated with the rest of the model. and how they don't stand out as strong as before. Well, just after completing the oil washes, I like to move to chipping, so for a first approach I chose the sponge method. This way of representing small chips allows me to move quickly and getting good and quick results. I prepared a light green color and I applied it especially in the turret for enhancing a little bit more the cast texture. Painting chipping with the sponge means applying soft touches. This technique has to be done softly if you want to control the result. For integrating a little bit more the effect, I applied some more chips on the decals. This will make them to look like deteriorated markings. I also decided to apply some more light chipping in the main plates and hatches. This will make them more interesting and will add some more extra texture. Due to the super tiny size, I only needed to apply some touches for creating a convincing result. You can see how crispy the result is. Maybe it is too excessive for a 1/72nd scale, but hey, I think they are super cool. Later, with whole red color and a fine detail brush, I moved to the main chipping work. This time working with a brush allows me to be more precise when painting and control better the shape and finish of the small chips. In this step I try to create some chipping around the main shapes and details. I'm not pretty good at representing chips by brush, but in this scale it's just a matter of creating small random patterns around the most exposed areas. Again, I try to represent some deep chipping on the decals, just by applying small dots of paint over them. And this is how I worked in the chipping stage. I like the result, just a little bit overdone, but I have to recognize it was really funny to experiment other possibilities with this small guy. Okay, so let's go dirty this time. Wondering about how to represent dirt and mud in this small tank, I remember that I had in my paint stock this product from Ammo, but why not to try it in this tiny vehicle? Prior to weather the main hull and body of the tank, I like to work with the running gear and trucks. So, being my first contact with this type of products, I made some texting while applying it. First I use it for representing some dirt accumulated in the trucks. If not, I would lose all the truck's main detail. One thing that was very useful for was to fill the small gaps between track links, and this product really solved that issue. For representing some mud in the chassis sides, I applied this product directly. Again, the texture was not very good for this scale, and also I tried to blend the effect with some tap water. When dry, I don't know why, but it got a glossy finish. So to fix it, I had to airbrush some ultra matte varnish for changing it into a matte finish. And after that, yes, the result was so much better. So for keep going with the weathering, I took some enamels, and with this dark matte color, I applied it like some kind of earth wash, for getting some more depth in the matte effect. For integrating the bogies and road wheels with the previous matte effect, I applied some light dust oil color, and later some washes with sepia color in the interior of the wheels. Finally, the external side of the trucks was finished by polishing the exposed metal parts with a mechanical pencil and its graphite. Lower side areas of the chassis were worked in the same way. I applied the same light dust color as with the road wheels, creating first some streaking pattern, and later I applied the same dust tone by speckling it. Applying the same dust color in different ways really did its job, and the result was pretty interesting. Finally, for creating some wet matte effect, I applied some sepia oil in the same way as with the light dust color. But this time the application of the wet matte tone was limited to the areas closer to the ground. For applying some dust effect in the hull, I went for a light application almost exclusively in the front and sides of the tank. What I learned in my last experience in the 1/72nd scale is that I shouldn't create weathering effects as heavy as with bigger scales like 1/35th scale for example. So due to this, I prefer to represent the dust effect in a light way instead of overdone the effect and ruin the main result. In the past I had bad experiences with that issues, ruining a few models, trust me. So you can see the dusting result for now. Also, I placed the truck's pieces for checking all the pieces together, and I think the result is quite good, because there is a connection between the heavy weathered trucks and the upper hull of the tank. While retaking the painting in the whole area, it's time to recover some contrast in some details and creating some extra sharpness in certain areas. I prepared some sepia oil color diluted with enamel thinner, and I applied it in some little pieces, especially on the engine deck area that had lost their definition, and all the tank tools like shovel, hammer and gun support, which are movable parts in the rear vehicle, should be more contrasted. When applying again this selective pin wash, I can't forget about blending, and here I should be even more accurate than before while removing the excess. For outlining a little bit more the muddy areas, I used raw umber oil color applied in the same consistency as the sepia tone. Both colors are very similar and work very well when creating this type of effects. I also outlined the rear hatch, and I applied a light wash all over the road wheels. In the whole area, this raw umber color can be used as some kind of a streaking effect or for representing grime in some places. For giving more interest into the engine deck area, I used this raw umber color for representing a heavy grimy effect. First, I tried to make some speckling in the rear area, and later I applied some oil in a heavy wash consistency around it. By this time I tried to create a mix of some streaking and spilled grime effects in the very end of the vehicle. Also, I draw some thin lines like if some of that grime would have spilled by gravity. Now for representing some spilled fuel, I use this burnt umber color. Before adding a glossy finish, this warm brownish color will work very well for representing the effect of spilled fuel mixed with earth and dust. First I apply it in the fuel and oil caps of the engine, and later I create some heavy streaking fuel in the sides. This is something characteristic of Sherman tanks, and you can check it out in almost every historical photo. It is important to create similar but different effects in both sides. The result should be asymmetric, so the left side fuel effect became wider than the right side. For creating the fresh fuel effect, I went with some acrylic gloss varnish heavily diluted for controlling better the effect. So applying this heavily diluted varnish will help me for creating a very thin effect. You can check the final result in both sides and see the differences between them. By now there are just still a few parts to paint and detail. For representing rust in the spare track links, I use these three oil colors. First I apply the burnt sienna on its own, and later I complement it with some mixed yellow, which will give me a nice orange tone, very accurate for representing rust. Both tones were blended properly, creating a wide variety of rust colors, with good results in my opinion. With a fine detail brush and some sepia oil color, I outlined the spare track links. Doing this really increased the details in these parts. Finally, because of the lack of details and texture of the original plastic parts, I had to use some orange acrylic color for creating some extra contrast in these rusty parts. But I think the result is worth enough. What do you think? Moving again to the engine deck, with this acrylic color, I will represent some wooden chipping in the tools. I created the effect of chipped wood by applying small paint dots in a random pattern in the handle of the tools, especially in the more exposed areas. The workflow in the rest of the pieces is very similar, but always trying to create some variety. For the chipping in the steel parts, I used a dark grey color that I applied in the edges of the metal parts of the tools. And this is the result. I have to say that this is the effect I personally like most by far in this little model. Finally, for adding more detail into the engine deck area, I applied some metallic golden chipping to the fire extinguishers. This is just a little touch but really interesting to make in British vehicles. And just for finishing the model, I took out again my mechanical pencil for representing some more polished metal. Finally, why not to paint the headlights with graphite too? So, at last, it's time to glue everything tight and together. And here, plastic cement will become extremely useful. Also, I need to remove the cork handling pieces. So, here it is. Look how small. The Sherman Firefly has been finished and fully painted. For being a recent kit, Airfix has made a good plastic model. Very good for these quick type projects in my opinion. This is a nice looking tank, but on the other hand, I missed some finer detail, which sometimes I had no other chance that overdone certain effects to get good and crispier results. All in all, I'm very happy with the result. There's been 8 years since I built my last 1/72nd scale tank, so I'm really satisfied with it. This little Firefly made me remember some of the kind advantages of these 1/72nd scale models that you can't enjoy in bigger scales. All in all, in the next videos I will return to bigger scale models. I hope you found this video useful or at least interesting. So thanks for watching and I see you in the next one.